If you take a step back and think about the people you lead, do they follow you because they have to or because they want to? And that's a really important distinction, because if you are setting the example and you create a culture of leadership and teamwork and mission that people are excited and passionate about, that starts with you, leading yourself, but then that translates to others.
So you have a passion for fitness and the desire to start your own business, but launching a massively successful fitness business is extremely complex. The systems, operations, hiring, firing, coaching, sales, and marketing are critical to success. Where do you even start? This show will give you the answers. Here is Bedros Keuilian and Bryce Henson, your hosts of the Fitness Franchise Podcast, a show dedicated to helping fitness entrepreneurs launch and grow successful gyms.
Welcome back, friends, to another incredible episode of the Fitness Franchise Podcast. And before I tee up today's guest, I want to give you a friendly reminder. Give us a like and subscribe on YouTube and write an awesome review on iTunes. That way we can keep producing this content for you for free. So now to introduce today's guest, who's a dear friend of mine, have known since 2018. He's also a New York Times best-selling author of The Trident, a Navy SEAL, a Purple Heart winner, a Bronze Star, a Star of Valor winner, and my dear friend who's going to teach you how to overcome adversity, how to get off the X, and how to be a better leader, my friend, Mr. Jason Redman. Welcome to the show.
Bryce, what's up, brother?
Dude,
Good
so
to see you.
Pumped to have you here. I know we've been planning this for a few months here, and a lot of value, a lot of things to cover. And for our audience, why I was so interested, Jay's been a longtime friend for a handful of years now. And when I think of Jay, I think of two things that come to mind, which is overcoming adversity and then leadership. And for business and entrepreneurship, I mean, that's just the name of the game. So my friend, lots to cover today. Before we go through it, give us the backstory.
Backstory, young kid, grew up poor, all over the place. Came from a broken divorced family, and although a very patriotic family, dad served in the Army, both grandfathers served in World War II. So grew up with just this idea of wanting to serve in the military. And from a very young age, about 14, I heard about the SEAL teams, and I said, that's what I want to do. And I went off into the SEAL teams and excelled as a young man in the SEAL teams. But like many young men, sometimes when we excel at a young age, we start to think a little too highly of ourselves, and started to walk with a couple of negative friends called ego and arrogance. And, that almost became my downfall. So my story is a journey. It is a journey of leadership. It is a story of failure and redemption. Growing up and learning what it is to be a leader. Being a leader is hard in any environment. It's especially hard when you're leading people into circumstances where incredibly dangerous or death is part of what you do. And that's all part of my story. It's about, building great teams, both the teams that I have in the military, the teams in business, and my inner circle teams, my family, and just blessed, man. Blessed to still be here. Obviously severely injured on the battlefield, which became a next level, learning about leadership, learning you can lead from any situation. Oftentimes, a lot of leadership is just your attitude. And these are now all the things that I teach, all the things that I've built into my life that have worked. And it's been an incredible journey.
Heck yeah, man. Well, respect, first and foremost. Thank you for your service. Means a ton. And, we're going to talk a little bit about the details of your story and your journey. But let's unpack that for a little bit. So it's interesting when I think of, your story at 14 years old, you knew, okay, the SEALs, this is what I want to do. And I think initially when I hear that, I think vision. And it's certainly very important for an entrepreneur and a business owner to have vision. Kind of jumping into your experience with the SEALs. BUDS, basic underwater demolition.
SEAL training.
Obviously world renowned. So why don't you unpack that a little bit? Because we've all heard about it, but from a detailed perspective, walk us through that experience.
Yeah, BUDS is the basic training for anyone who ever wants to become a SEAL. And it is fascinating in this world. There's a lot of fakes out there. As a matter of fact, you are more likely to meet a fake SEAL than you are a real SEAL. To date, there's only about, I don't have the exact numbers, but I would estimate only about 12,000 men that have ever actually successfully graduated SEAL training and earned the Trident.
So when you say fake, meaning people just advertise they're a SEAL, but they're actually not a SEAL. They didn't go through the program.
That's right.
Oh,
there are
wow.
a ton of fake, and even more so in the last, 10, 15 years, where I think the SEAL name is really, there's a lot of notoriety out there about the SEALs. Yeah, a lot more in the spotlight, a lot more, which is both good and bad. Many people in the community don't like that, but it is what it is. And because of that, you'll meet a lot of fake SEALs. So I'm going to throw out this one fact, that if anybody ever tells you, oh, you won't find my name in the books because I did all these classified missions and they erased my name, that's bullshit.
Call BS.
Yeah. That's just not true. SEAL training itself is not classified, or at least, the records of individuals. Later on, you may do missions that will indeed be classified, and things like that could happen, but not the case. Bottom line, SEAL training is designed to forge young men into warriors. And it is devastatingly difficult. It has about an 80% attrition rate.
80%, so 20% pass.
Correct.
And how long is it?
SEAL training is 7 months for the initial, BUDS is 7 months, but then from there you go on to more advanced training. That's all part of the pipeline before you ultimately earn your Trident, which is the SEAL emblem. So,
which is also a book that you wrote as well.
Which is the reason why it was about that emblem and that journey to earn it and almost lose it because of my own ego and arrogance, which that's a whole nother story in itself, because how difficult it is to earn this emblem, and obviously to lose it is not a good thing, a very, very hard thing, and I almost did. So BUDS it's a great journey. It really teaches you a lot about yourself. It teaches you that you can do 10 times more than what you think you can. The human body can take so much abuse. Physically, your mind can tell your body to keep going, even though your body is saying, I can't go any further. And it is incredible how much further you can push yourself. And that is the essence and core of what SEAL training is about. It also teaches you how to navigate and think through complex and chaotic environments. Which is a critical skill you have to have as a SEAL. If you are in a dangerous, chaotic situation, you can't panic or stick your head in the sand. You've got to be able to process information very quickly and still execute, which obviously translates into many aspects in life as entrepreneurs, as leaders.
Totally.
So,
what would you say from your perspective when you look back at the experience, like one or two big learning lessons or takeaways from BUDS?
Don't quit. Oftentimes when we think it's the hardest and we think we can take absolutely no more, you're close to the tipping point of success. Number two, oftentimes when we think we can't take any more, you may not near the end of an evolution or the tipping point to success, but you may be on the tipping point of the ability to suddenly just grind through. I think in the project where I was honored to be a guest instructor recently, they called it flipping the switch. And I do absolutely believe that. There is a point in your mind and in your body where you can just flip a switch. We see it in Hell Week. It normally occurs around Wednesday of Hell Week. Hell Week starts on Sunday. It goes all the way to Friday. Usually somewhere on Wednesday, there is a switch that gets thrown within all young men where it no longer matters what you do to them. They will go to their death at that point because you have now just moved into a higher zone.
Like a mental switch.
And I would say that in business and life, there is that switch also. We can talk a little later about balance because there is a danger in the ability to flip that switch because I talk about it in my book, Overcome. This is also the burnout zone, and it is a danger zone. You can operate at that level for a significant period of time, but at some point you reach a declining point where if you are not careful, you can literally push yourself to your death, whether physically, emotionally, mentally, or financially, if you're continuing to grind and not really being aware of everything going on around you.
Totally. In business, we call that the law of diminishing returns from a marketing perspective, an advertising perspective, but it has a whole another level of significance when your life's on the line.
Right.
So, good stuff. Well, okay, so you go through BUDS. I have a few notes here that you also did some deployments, of course, in Iraq and Afghanistan, we'll talk about, but ultimately in South America as well. So kind of talk us through that early, part of your journey leading up to, when you got commissioned.
Yeah, I was a young man. I joined the military in 1992. So this was pre-9/11, and pre-9/11 military was definitely different than, you have peacetime military, you have wartime military. Very different footings. There's an ebb and flow with everything in life, kind of like bull and bear markets, I guess, if you will. And I joined in a peacetime military. The SEAL teams did a ton of training at that point, but there was not a lot of warfare that was going on. Some of the things that we were doing, at least for me, we were area of the world specific, and my team focused on Central and South America. So obviously in the late 80s into the 90s, we were heavily fighting the drug war that was going on, that was coming into all the drugs that were funneling into our country. A lot of that was being produced in Peru and Colombia, so I spent a lot of time down there doing counter-drug work. I mean, here I was, this 20-year-old kid deploying to Colombia and Peru, doing these counter-drug operations. So it was kind of my first exposure to the world. I saw many things. I saw the most extreme levels of poverty I've ever seen. Coming from America, frequently we don't see that. Even in some of our poorest areas, there's still nothing compared to when you go to an absolute third world country. Totally. And you see the levels of poverty. I saw first levels of extreme violence. We stayed in an old drug cartel compound at one point when I was in Colombia, and they had a torture room, and they took us down in that torture room and showed us some of the things that they had done, and that was kind of my first introduction to the depravity and violence that men have. It was the first time I saw someone shot, first time I saw some pretty egregious injuries that I got to work on. And first time I ever got shot at. We got shot at a pretty remote base I was operating in southern Colombia. So all unique experiences in this peacetime military that I was living in.
If you can unpack that, and certainly want your takeaway, and I always like to kind of get the takeaways from any crazy experience, traumatic experience, really in-depth life experience. What would you say, that period of your SEAL training and career, what were the big lessons, one or two lessons that you took from that?
I learned that the more you study and the more you understand, the better you get. And being a subject matter expert in your craft is critical. I was a communicator, and I was very good at what I did. I mean, communications in the military, which is interesting because I believe communications is one of the key components of leadership also. 100%. So many military missions will fail because of a failure in communications. Our ability to communicate, whether it was through satellite communications, high frequency, VHF, inter-squad communications, it was literally a failure point within our mission, no different than now I see in business, it can be a failure point. So I really poured myself into understanding all that and really became recognized as an expert within our team within that arena.
Now, do you think that was because, from my perspective as well, communication is just essential in business, essential in leadership? Like if you look at any great leader, typically communication is one of their key qualities. For you, do you think that was like a factory installed DNA, or do you think it was basically a learned skill, or maybe in both?
Learned skill,
okay.
Absolutely, and something that I still, even to this day, I mean, leadership is not some switch that gets thrown on like bang, suddenly I'm this great leader. It's a journey that never ends, and I don't care at what level of leader you are. You look at Bedros and everything that he's created with Fit Body Bootcamp. He is regarded across the country as this great entrepreneur, leader, and coach. He still makes mistakes. Everyone at the top of their game, I don't care who they are, Warren Buffett, Elon Musk, we make mistakes. I mean,
Elon Musk, I was just watching a podcast, his first 3 tries for SpaceX basically blew up in smoke, and he literally was in his last dollar for the 4th and it ended up working out. But to your point, he failed 3 times before the 4th was successful.
And I think that's critical to understand, and communication is all a big part of that. And understanding, man, I could have communicated better. That's one of the big things I often think about. When there's a failure or something that's gone wrong, I often look back and say, you know what, man, I probably could have communicated that better. If you look at it from a military perspective, everything within military operations, because there are so many multi-levels of any military operations, from ground operations to what we're doing to air assets, ground assets, other government agencies we may be working with, it is rings and rings and rings of communication and clarifying who's doing what, how's it impacting you. If you do something that's creating an impact on me, if we don't know those things are happening, that's where collisions and failure points can happen. So our ability to have that communication all the way through is critical,
Totally.
and making sure we're doing that. So that was number one. Number two, I kind of lost myself during those years. A young kid who grew up poor on, all over the place, broken family. The SEAL teams worked hard and we really played hard. And I really embraced the play hard mindset. I really enjoyed to drink and party.
Which is common, though, I feel like, in the military, at least stories you hear.
It is. We are a heavy drinking community. The special operations is a heavy drinking community. And in some ways, and I don't know if I necessarily agree with this, and I'm sure there are some special operations guys that'll say, you're a wuss, screw you. We put a lot of emphasis on the mettle of a man, how much he can drink. Hey, if you can drink all night and still get up and operate, you're a great guy. That's bullshit. I'll tell you what I learned later in my career and what I now talk to young men about is not once did I ever, when we were evaluating guys to bring into a troop or say, hey, what is the caliber of this individual? Do we want them? Never once did I ever say, you know what, man, we want to bring Bryce in. Man, Bryce is a solid leader. He's a great operator. Man, that dude is a phenomenal sniper. He is a beast. He's calm under fire, but he doesn't drink much. So you know what? Maybe we don't want Bryce.
We're going to pass on him.
Yeah, exactly. Never once did I hear him go, dude, Bryce parties like Tommy Lee. He's not a very good operator. He kind of sucks in this area and that area. He's not really in shape very often, but you know what? That dude can party. We want him in our troop.
Right.
Like it doesn't happen that way. So I don't care how much emphasis. It is great to socialize and spend time with guys, but as with anything in this life, there is a balance. And when I was younger, I leaned too far on the other side of that balance. So that was one thing that I started to learn, and that became it became a failure point in my life several years later as a young leader.
Okay, so a couple big takeaways through that experience. All right, so let's transition, and Jay, knowing you and also being introduced into your network of a lot of other SEALs. I mean, you're very well respected within your community. A good friend of ours, Ray, and closer friend to you, calls you boss man. So I know you got commissioned, I believe, in 2004 when you graduated from Old Dominion. So I'm sure that was part of your, story in terms of escalating from leadership. But obviously, just because you're a commissioned officer doesn't mean that leadership is in your DNA. But I'm curious from your perspective, kind of what that process look like, and then what were the benefits of being commissioned and how that went through?
Yeah, so it's such a powerful thing. Oftentimes I meet people who say, I'm not a leader. Well, everyone is a leader. Leaders are not born. You are not born a leader. Although I will say that there are certain genetic traits and personality traits that make people a better leader. There's no doubt about it. But you can build yourself to be a leader. Leadership is learned, and you can totally shape yourself as a leader. But a title does not make you a leader. And this is why it was so critical. When I wrote my book, The Trident, it was very important to me to really, and I feel like I'm one of the first guys in the SEAL teams that really wrote about, hey, I screwed up. There are a lot of tremendous books that are out there, great books, although oftentimes I feel like guys write themselves off as like, hey man, I'm Achilles. And that's just not the case. They were great warriors. A lot of these guys that I served with were better warriors than I was. But at the same time, they also had setbacks and failures. When I wrote my book, The Trident, it originally, the publishing company wanted to call it The Forging and Reforging of a Navy SEAL Officer. And I said no, because just because you're an officer doesn't make you a good leader. Just because you have title of CEO or manager or vice president or chief or whatever it is, that doesn't make you a good leader. And I made that mistake as a young leader. I was like, hey, I'm now a SEAL officer, so I'm this. Everyone's
going to respect me because of that.
Yeah, and everybody's going to follow me because I wear this title, I wear this rank, and that's just absolutely incorrect. Leadership is learned, and that really started to shape, after I failed, who I was as a leader and also how I led myself. It became the development of the 3 rules of leadership that I now follow in my own life, and how I rebuilt myself as a leader after that failure point to become a good and respected leader, and really to do something almost impossible in special operations, specifically in the SEAL teams. If you fail or you make a big mistake, especially a tactical level mistake, it's almost impossible to come back. And rightfully so. We don't tolerate individuals who display selfish traits or display traits that could potentially get other people killed or don't have the tactical awareness or the operational capabilities. At the end of the day, your lives depend on the guys next to you, and specifically on those leaders who are making those calls. And to be able to come back from that and finally have guys say, wow, I respect that guy, I'll follow that guy. That's probably the hardest road I've ever walked, but it also is one of the most rewarding that has shaped me into who I am today and on many of the things that I now teach and write about.
Totally. You just mentioned that you had 3 pillars of leadership, which you kind of crafted, and then those are 3 principles you live by. What are those?
So most of the time when people think about leadership, they think about external leadership. Hey, how do I lead this person? How do I lead my company? And they fail to understand that at the end of the day, it all comes back to you. So the 3 rules of leadership, number 1 is you have to lead yourself. And this is for first and foremost. And man, this gets super multi-layered and gets really deep. There's a level of balance that we have to have as a leader. I teach something called the Pentagon of Peak Performance. It's the 5 pillars that every good leader, in my opinion, puts time and effort into. So it's physical leadership, it's mental leadership, it's emotional leadership, social leadership, and spiritual leadership.
And those 5 pillars encapsulate really leadership in all its entirety.
And how important it is to put time and effort into those areas, because if you are not, there are failure points in your life. And those failure points typically don't show up when things are good. It's like anything, when we start putting pressure and stress on it, it's when things start to break. And if you're not strong in those areas, that's when things start to break, and it always comes back to you. 70% of leadership is your ability to lead yourself. And if things are starting to get off track in your life, always go back and look in the mirror and say, where am I at? How am I doing? Am I leading in all aspects of my life? Am I balanced in my leadership? Am I communicating effectively? That's just absolutely critical. And so often people don't understand that. Many times when I go into companies and speak, people are like, hey man, I'm struggling with my company. I'm struggling with my team, can you help me? And my first question is always, how well do you lead yourself?
Like, look at the mirror.
Yeah, and you know that things are off if they're like, no, I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about my team. Okay, well, therein lies the problem. So number 1, lead yourself. Structure and discipline within your own life. Number 2, lead others. And how we lead others frequently is not telling people what to do. One of the critical questions I love to ask people is, hey man, if you take a step back and think about the people you lead, do they follow you because they have to or because they want to? And that's a really important distinction, because if you are setting the example and you create a culture of leadership and teamwork and mission that people are excited and passionate about, that starts with you, leading yourself, but then that translates to others. If you are effectively leading yourself, once again, 70% of leadership is your ability to lead yourself, it naturally translates to leading others. They want to follow you. And then it gets into, how do you motivate and inspire? How do you provide the resources and the training, the accountability, and then trust them to go out and execute? Not micromanage them. Trust them, man. They may not do things exactly like you do, but if the end state is where you want to go, and as long as it's within the right and left limits and the accountability structure you put in place, man, let them go out and execute. That's going to breed an amazing culture. And then rule number 3, you got to lead always. And this is the hardest, because in the hard times and the life crisis and the ambushes and the problems, there's a natural tendency, all of us, it's human nature, whether you're a SEAL or a salesman, or in the fitness franchise, or whatever, there's a natural tendency when things get really hard for us to start turning inward. And we focus inward on ourselves, and we're just trying to grind through, when the reality is, what we fail to recognize is, if you're going through that, most likely everyone else around you is feeling it also. And that is the most critical time to step up and lead, and that is this lead always idea. And so often we think that there's these gigantic, like, we have to save the day, like we have to fix everything, and we get overwhelmed with this, when the reality is, oftentimes leading always through really hard life storms, it's just your attitude. Your attitude will determine the outcome. It's positivity in the face of negativity, and that translates to hope and people understanding, wow, there's still something we can do. Okay, we can control what we can in this chaotic situation. But that is leading always, not focusing inward, continuing to focus outward despite the problems and adversity you're encountering.
Dude, so much gold there. And in my experience, and B and I say this all the time, like leadership is always the problem and it's always the solution. And whether you're on the battlefield where the stakes in your particular case, which I have so much reverence for, are extremely high, or you're running a fitness franchise or a local gym or a local fit body or whatever the case may be, leadership is always the problem and it's always the solution.
And it's the same. You know, oftentimes people will say to me, oh, well, because you're a SEAL, you're a better leader.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. Leadership is leadership. The principles of leadership are the same across this world. No matter what culture, no matter what problems I saw, leadership is still leadership. Like you said, whether it's on the battlefield or whether it's in the boardroom, the principles are the same. And they are learned. They are learned principles. And if you can learn to do those 3 rules of leadership that I talk about, I guarantee your company, your team, and even your family, you lead your family that way too.
Yeah. All right, good stuff. Well, now I want to transition to my, I guess, main event of this particular conversation, which is September 13th, 2007. And, you know, for those of you who don't know or are listening to this on audio, you know, Jay has a couple souvenirs on his left arm, on his face from, you know, gunfire exchange, which we'll talk about here. But September 13th, 2007, talk to us.
So September 13, 2007, I found myself on the X. And often many of you that follow me will know I frequently talk about the X. I wrote a lot about the X in my book, Overcome, and the need to have an overcome mindset to get off the X. So what is the X? The X is the point of attack, the point of a crisis, the point of an adversity. It is an ambush point. So as a SEAL, one of our key jobs is, you know, direct action or capture kill missions. In order to capture or kill an enemy, we have to know where they are.
By the way, real quick here, I hear that all the time, capture or kill, correct? And in that situation, and I'm just curious, this is very ignorant, but not, you know, understanding the military, is it one or the other on that objective of the mission, or is it basically this mission we're going to capture, this mission we're going to kill? What does that look like?
No, ideally it's capture/kill. Okay. So the idea, we would like to capture individuals, okay, because you cannot get information out of a corpse. Totally. So if we can capture someone, that is always ideal. And out of the probably 100 plus real world missions I did between Afghanistan and Iraq, we captured far more, probably 75% of the missions we executed, we captured. Because by capturing, we now are breaking into networks, gathering information, and all this pulls together to create more intelligence, to execute more targets, and to break apart networks and stuff like that. Oftentimes, the enemy doesn't cooperate with that plan, and they will fight back to the death. And at that point, obviously, they are killed. Yep. So
back to the story. I hear that a lot.
So being on the X, so as a SEAL and in capture kill, the X is the point of attack. This is where we're going. We need to place the enemy on the X. We need to know what that X is, and then we build our mission set on how we're going to execute. You know, keeping the enemy on the X and whether we capture or kill that individual. The flip side of that coin is being on the X. And now you are the one on the ambush point or in the attack, whether it's a sniper attack, whether it's an IED attack, whether it's a combination of all of the above. So on September 13th, we launched on a mission to go after the #1 leader for the Al-Qaeda organization in the Anbar province of Iraq. Pretty dangerous individual. He was responsible for the downing of a Marine Corps CH-46 helicopter in the fall of '06, killing all crew members. He ran IED cells, he ran sniper cells, and he was directly responsible for the first mission on our deployment. I was not on that mission at that time, but it was a joint combined mission with my SEAL team and another SEAL team. Several of our guys were on it. It was on that mission that several guys got all shot up. Senior Chief Mike Day was one of those individuals. Mike wrote a book, Perfectly Wounded. Amazing story if you get to read that book. But on that mission, Petty Officer Clark Schwedler was killed. And that was the first time we had crossed paths with this individual in this cell that we were now tracking throughout that entire deployment. And on September 13th, we got word he was going to be in a specific time and location. We launched on that mission, and to make a long story short, we walked into a very well-executed ambush. They
on their side.
On their side. They predicted that we were coming. They predicted how we were going to come in. And we didn't come in exactly how they had predicted, but we still, through a series of circumstances, and if you can read all about this in the Trident, but for time, I will just say we ended up ending up directly on the X. And in that, it was about a 40-minute firefight that erupted.
And when you say we, how many guys are with you?
So originally 9, we got separated, which is almost a whole nother story because that creates, you talk about leadership challenges, you now are in what we call in the military a blue on blue situation.
Like friendly fire.
We have the potential to shoot each other. So that was a huge concern of mine. Thankfully, one of the more senior leaders in our broken off group was smart enough to realize we are out of the fight. And he pulled those guys away and made sure they weren't shooting when we suddenly found ourselves on the X in this massive firefight with about 15 individuals, 2 PKM machine guns, which is a large belt-fed weapon, right off the bat. And we were totally exposed. We were out in the open. We were in front of this vegetation, which is where the ambush line was. The X was in this field where we were, nothing but thousands of yards of empty Iraqi desert. And fortunately, there was a tree and there was a large John Deere style tractor tire, I don't know what, John Habib's, John Habib. But there was that tractor tire that our guys fell back to. We got all shot up. I was only about 45 feet from the machine gun that lit off on me, stitched me across the body, 3 rounds, or rounds across the body armor. I took 2 rounds in the left elbow, which I thought shot my arm off.
I mean, it looks, even to this day, it's obviously, pretty deformed and shattered. All the bullets went straight through your arm. And
yeah, two rounds. One hit me in the bicep, which did a lot of damage. One hit me on the inside of the forearm that went through and just destroyed really my elbow. And because of the nerve damage, I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't move my arm. My arm actually caught on my gear.
Oh, wow.
Well, I felt a ton of pain.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel my arm anymore. And when my arm caught on my gear, it's about 3 a.m. in the morning. It's chaotic. Bullets are flying. There's explosions. So when I reached over, I didn't feel my arm. So my initial thought was, holy shit, I just got my arm shot off. I kept shooting. And the guys were falling back. I was yelling because I was worried about shooting our other guys at this point. In a gunfight, well-trained forces understand usually the guy that's yelling and directing is the leader. Mm-hmm. And I suddenly found both machine guns turned on me at that point, which I had been shot at quite a few times at this point, but nothing like this. It was literally overwhelming, the amount of gunfire coming at me.
And do you have any, is there any brush or protection? Or you
nothing?
Like
totally
vulnerable?
Exposed. I had.
Are you on the ground?
I had initially dropped to the ground, and I think at this point, unfortunately, I gotten up on my knee to engage and was looking. I won't even get into that. I was up on a knee. When I had gotten shot, I got shot at again the second time. I took a round off my helmet, rounds off my gun, round off my right side plate. I had my left night vision tube shot off. And at that point, realizing, man, you're in a really bad situation. I turned to move back to the tractor tire where the guys had fallen back to, and that's when I caught a round in the face. So it hit me right in front of the ear from behind, traveled through my face, took off my nose, blew out my right cheekbone. What was left of my cheek broke and kicked out to the right. It vaporized my orbital floor. It broke all the bones above my eye. My eye fell into this newfound hole in my face, broke the head of my jaw, and shattered my jaw to my chin. And collapsed on the ground unconscious in front of the guys who thought I was dead. I don't know how long to this day. We estimate I was probably unconscious for about 5 minutes when I came to and was laying flat on my back, literally watching gunfire travel above me. In a short lull in gunfire, I called out to my team leader, who at that point realized I was still alive. He ran forward in a lull in gunfire, so super heroic. I really felt like he deserved a Navy Cross, which is the second highest medal below the Medal of Honor. And unfortunately, it was downgraded to a Silver Star to this day. I still believe he deserves a Navy Cross. But he ran forward, grabbed me, dragged me back, got a tourniquet on my arm, and continued to navigate this gunfight. coordinate the medevac, and then he ended up calling in a fire mission, which to this day was the closest fire mission ever executed in Iraq. We literally called rounds from the sky directly on our position. Miraculously survived, which...
the entire team.
The entire team. Nobody was injured, which is really surprising because we were, in the military, there are terms called danger close parameters. It's how close you are. We know that when a bomb goes off, there's a certain amount of fragmentation and concussive blast from the explosion. You have to be outside those danger close parameters, rings, distance, to make sure that you do not injure or frag your own people. And we were way within the danger close parameters. And I'll be honest, I think because we were so close and because we were down, in my mind, I think that the blast went up above us. That's the only thing that makes sense. Because literally, I was conscious at that point, and I remember the rounds coming in and striking the ground like directly in front of us.
Holy shit, man. Dude, that's intense. I'm, honored and so grateful for, what you've done and the experience you went through. When you look back at it, dude, how do you unpack that? Like, what's the takeaway? Like, as you go through the experience, and actually, I want to talk about the second part when I've heard you tell this story about staying awake to stay alive. Before we get into that, like, how do you process this? What's the learning lessons? And you go through this incredibly traumatic experience. Your arm gets blown off, your face damaged. You just explain what had happened. What's the learning lessons? What's the takeaway that you took, and also too that you share with others?
So there's a lot of learning lessons out of it. Number one, I think when bad things happen as a leader, there's a natural tendency to start questioning and blaming yourself, especially when majorly traumatic things happen in our life, a major failure point. This was a major failure point. I mean, myself and several teammates were severely shot up. I was coming off the end of this leadership failure from several years ago that I'd made some poor decisions. So I'll be honest, my first thought process when I was kind of cognizant enough in the hospital was like, you screwed up. And I really was going down this road that so many of us do as leaders. Man, why didn't I see this? Why didn't I see that? Why did I move left when I should have moved right? Why didn't, and finally at one point I said, stop. And I took a step back and I said, did you do things according to how you had been trained? And yes, I did. I did things based off our standard operating procedures. I did things based off the best information I had at the time. I had gone through the sequence of steps. So I said that. And then I said, you cannot go back and change the past. What's happened has happened. All you can do now is live in the present and shape the future. So you've got to drive forward. You've got to get off this X.
Like ruthless acceptance of the situation.
You've got to live in reality.
Yeah.
So many people have this idealistic view, and this really gets deep into a lot of what I teach about when you're on the X. People have a tendency to do three things when they're on the X. It's human nature. We tend to look back and say, well, what if I had done this? Or I want back the world before I was injured, whatever it is. I want back the world before COVID, or before my business failed, or before my marriage failed, or whatever it is. We have a tendency to look forward and say, well, this is where I should have been. Like, and it's human nature. I mean, I often think about it, man, where would I have been? Could I have been on the Bin Laden mission if I had not been injured? I could, maybe. Who knows? But that's not reality. And then the last thing, and the most common that people do, is we focus on the pain and misery, and we look for someone or something to blame. It's their fault, it's his fault, it's this fault, it's that fault, it's my fault, whatever. None of that matters. All that matters is driving forward and getting off that X and shaping the future. And that's tough, but that comes down to rule number one, leading yourself. And that's really what I'd focused on. And I will tell you this, people avoid uncomfortable situations in life. They avoid dealing with uncomfortable scenarios, but you should be thankful when they come. When major failures come, when major uncomfortable things, don't quit and grind through them. Because the lessons you learn out of that will set you up for success in future ambushes and future problems. So many people think, well, gosh, man, you being injured on the battlefield must be the hardest thing that you ever went through. And it was tough. It ended up ending my SEAL career, at least my operational career. It permanently disabled me. I mean, there are certain things I just can't do anymore. No matter what I do, I will never, you know, I can't bend my arm any further than this. I can't extend any further than this. I still have some nerve damage in my hands. I'm disfigured, you know, not bad. I had one of the best surgeons in the world put me back together.
Still sexy as
hell,
man.
baby. But I mean, this is the reality. And driving forward and understanding that is critical in these situations, because most people, they don't want to do that. That leadership failure that I had suffered years ago set me up for success for this. If I had not gotten through that, if I had not grinded through, despite guys saying, I don't want to work with that guy, it took years to earn back my credibility and respect as a leader. But that journey teed me up for tremendous success being injured. Because I will never forget the moment when I was in the hospital when I said, you know what, man, you've been through worse. You just walked the hardest path you've ever walked. You just dug yourself out of the deepest hole you've ever been in. Like, let's go.
Dude, so powerful. The first thought that comes to my mind, I'm a huge believer in Stoic philosophy, and there's a book by Ryan Holiday called The Obstacle is the Way, and just kind of, you know, it really connected the dots of that. The leadership failure 7 years before, that was actually the obstacle. And then of course, the X was the obstacle, but like in your way to, you know, path of greatness, fulfillment, more notoriety, but ultimately being there for your team and just, you know, ascending to a higher level of leadership now, you know, with your, you know, ongoing career and the civilian side of things.
Absolutely.
So. Well, my friend, that's an incredible story. A lot of good takeaways there. And again, I mean, the stakes are in this particular story to our audience at home extremely high, but the takeaways in terms of leadership principles, in terms of the obstacles away, I mean, these are applicable to life, to business, to, you know, any aspect to someone's life.
Yeah, don't focus on what happened. There's going to be lessons learned that come out of it. But when you're on the X, when you're in the crisis, when you're in the traumatic event, when you're in the failure, that's not the time to sit there and blame yourself, blame others, look back at the past and say, I wish I had this, or look at the future and say, well, I should have been here. None of that matters. Get off the X. And, you know, there's methodology and things that I teach to try and help people to do that. But at the end of the day, embrace it. Embrace it and just lean into it and say, I've got to drive forward. Recognizing, very important, part of the overcome mindset is understanding that the outcome may not be the outcome that you hope and wish it would. You may not get your business back if it fails. You may not totally get your health back if there's some sort of health crisis, or if you're injured, you know. You may not repair your marriage if it's totally broken. But somewhere out there, there is an end state. And for every moment when something ends, there is a new beginning.
The door opens to something new.
But you have to embrace it and you have to drive forward. And that door may be totally locked down, man. There are chains and bolts and it's like the most complicated breacher problem you've ever seen. But you better bust up, man. Break out your explosive, break out your sledge and get ready. Because when you bust through that door, so often, so many people I know, I am living proof of this, I know so many people that are the same, that the end moment launched you into a new beginning.
Yeah, something better's on the other side.
Absolutely.
Dude, love it. All right, my friend, dude, this has been so valuable. I know a ton of value already, and I still have you for a few more minutes. You've been very gracious with your time, but I want to transition to the lightning round so our audience can really hear from you some last nuggets of knowledge, if that works for you.
Let's do it.
Cool. So in our business, in the fitness business, in the entrepreneur space, passion is fundamental to success. So, you know, from your perspective, Jay, what is one thing that you are passionate about today and why?
I am passionate about the overcome mindset, and I'm passionate about breaking. I feel like America is at a tipping point, and maybe even more of Western culture. And the reason being, you may not know this, but there's a large pandemic that's happening. And I'm not talking about COVID.
I'm not either. But
I'm talking about the victim mindset.
Oh yeah,
there are so many people out there that are being convinced they're a victim. And there is, even in politics, there are people that are trying to convince others that you are a victim. Race, creed, color, religion, gender persuasion, demographic, where you came from. I don't care what it is. We are raising a culture of victimhood.
So unfortunately so true.
And it's dangerous, and it is not what made America what it is. America's not perfect. There's this narrative out there that America's this evil place. That's such a lie. Are there flaws? Of course. There's flaws in everybody.
Yeah.
Every company, every nation, every man or woman has some flaws, but it's where we look at the greatness, and the greatness of America is the freedom, the opportunity, the resilience, the self-leadership. And we've got to bring that back. So I am passionate about teaching people that you are not defined by any character trait that you think. You are not a victim. You are a victor. And there's millions of people. Being a victor is a choice. The greatest gift you have in this life is you have a choice. When bad things happen to you, or you try and accept that because I was born in the poor streets of Harlem, that I can't be successful, or the only way I can be successful is to join this gang, that is a lie. It is a lie. And the reason I know it's a lie is because there's millions of super successful people who came out of the streets of Harlem, who came out of the backwoods of Alabama, who immigrated from, some hard place and came. Bedros. I mean, Bedros is an amazing example of an individual who came here and achieved the American dream despite everyone probably telling him you're a victim and you'll never amount to anything. So I want to break that. I am passionate about that. I want to teach people, once again, how to lead themselves, how to have an overcome mindset, to embrace discomfort and understanding that the journey, it ain't going to happen overnight. You can be a victor, not a victim. It is a choice.
Hell yes, my friend. Kindred spirits right here. That's such a good message and mission, because I couldn't agree with you more. Next up, zone of genius. What is the zone of genius of Jay Redman? Our audience and myself dying to know.
My zone of genius is resilience and tenacity. I mean, that is where I naturally have, genetically, I think I was just predisposed to have a stoic outlook. Oftentimes people will say to me, well, I just can't get past this. And in my mind, I can't understand why.
I can't either.
I'm like, bro, you just make a decision and you go. You just start moving forward. And I understand that maybe I'm not wired the same way that other people are. But for me, that is my zone of genius. I have just been very blessed that despite hard things in my life, at some point I say, well, this is where I'm at. So now how do we move forward?
Heck yeah. All right, next question. And specific to leadership, what would you say? Because obviously you have an incredible track record and experience. What's a unique value bomb that most people should know, most entrepreneurs should know about leadership, but potentially don't?
It always comes back to leading yourself. So when things get off track in your life, if things get off track in your family, take a step back and say, how well am I leading myself? Am I taking care of myself physically? Am I taking care of personally? Am I still nurturing relationships? And then professionally, am I moving the needle in the areas that I need to? Making sure that I'm not just addressing the fires that are erupting every day, but I'm making sure that I'm strategically still at least a little bit every day moving the needle down the strategic things that need to be done in leadership and for your company or for your team.
Love it. Next up, and you might have already shared, but it could be another story in your list of accolades, but you've had an incredible amount of success in your life. What would you say is one of the lowest experiences, whether it be from a career perspective or just life perspective, and how'd you overcome it?
That leadership failure, to be told that you don't measure up and that there were guys who said you don't deserve to be a SEAL, that we should take your Trident and kick you out. That is the lowest point I've ever been in my life. I actually put a gun in my mouth and almost took my life. And that journey out, was the hardest road I've ever walked. I'm really good at dealing with haters and naysayers today because I received a lot of hate and naysayers from within my own team after I had made those mistakes. And rightfully so, I don't judge any of them. Their lives were on the line, and I had shown some traits that said, hey, this guy isn't committed to the level of commitment we have to have. And it took several years to build that back up. And it was a long, hard road. And that definitely to this day is the hardest life ambush I've ever gone through. But one step at a time, focused on the 3 rules of leadership, built balance back into my life. And that's what enabled me to be successful.
Good, man. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
All right, a few more questions here. Now, you're in the business, especially with your consulting company, with your masterminds, with your coaching programs, which I'll have the opportunity, give you the opportunity to talk about in a second, but giving great advice, to people about leadership and your experiences in life. What would you say is one of the best pieces of advice you've ever received, and why?
Best piece of advice was after I'd failed, I'd gone to Ranger School, and I failed in evolution, and in a moment of emotional weakness, technically quit. You know, the instructors kind of attacked me and jumped on me for failing this land navigation exercise, and I was at an emotionally weak and low point in my life, and they said, "Oh, so are you quitting?" And I was like, "Screw you, yes, I'm out of here." I had to go meet with the Ranger Colonel, and I bought into all the lies we tell ourselves when we're in a low point. You know, you're not good enough, you don't have the ability to lead, you're a failure, you're a fake, you're a fraud, all these things, like you deserve to go. And I got put on the phone with one of the most respected SEAL leaders who was my overall boss, who had mentored me, who had helped me become an officer. And I remember saying to him, like, nobody's ever going to follow me again. I've messed up too much. And he said to me, "Jay, people will follow you if you give them a reason to. Go back to that course, crush it, come back to the SEAL teams and give them a reason to follow you." That is the essence of leading yourself. It is the essence of leadership by example, and it is never too late. I don't care who you are. I don't care what age you are. If you still got breath in these lungs, there is a chance to turn things around, but it starts with you, and that was the greatest leadership advice I ever got. I tell it to people now all the time. It's never too late. People will follow you if you give them a reason to.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. Next up, book advice, and I'm going to tee this up and make a shameless plug here. I've read the book, The Trident. Actually, B, co-host of this particular show, cites your book, Trident, being one of the foundational reasons for his leadership shift and really creating the empire being in the building that we're today. So aside from The Trident, so if you haven't read it, I highly encourage you. What would be another book recommendation that's really been impactful in your journey?
I read a lot, so I'm going to hit three really fast, because I think three that within the last 2 years I've read that made such a big impact. Number one, I just finished reading Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. I would highly encourage you to read it. And there are some of you that are going to read it and you're going to hate it, but I would say do some deep self-awareness, because you may hate it because you connect better with a negative aspect of the story than the positive aspect of the story. And it is about, it's scary to think, because that book was written in the 1940s, late 1940s.
Yeah, I was going to say close to 100 years ago.
And it is, everything you see that's happening in our country is reflected in this book. So very big book, and why I now, as part of leadership, you know, you have to be a producer in this life. Lead, produce, protect. And being a producer in this life, producing something of value to others, is critical in this life, and critical to a solid nation, you know, an economy and all these things. Second book is a book called Finding Hannibal. It's a book about leadership. It's a phenomenal book about following Hannibal and his...
Finding Hannibal or following?
Finding.
Okay.
Finding Hannibal. But it is a book about leadership, about when Hannibal went over the Swiss Alps. He did the impossible, and then trying to take down the Roman Empire. But it really shows different styles of leadership from different Roman generals who changed their strategy to fight against Hannibal, who was by far a better tactician. But Hannibal made some mistakes also. And then it reflects on some other leaders. So that book was... Oftentimes, leadership, people know certain ways to lead, so oftentimes they'll only do that, but the reality is different leadership scenarios call for different tactics. And this is where you may have to grow as a leader and say, wow, I don't know how to do this, but this is how I may need to address this situation. And that book really kind of reflects that, how they had to adjust different scenarios based on someone who really was better than them. But Hannibal didn't end up winning because the Romans were smart in how they approached it, different leadership styles. And then the last one is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Rich Dad, Poor Dad on finance really changed my life. And I never had anyone help me with finance when I was younger. I'll be honest, I did not get smart with money until I was in my mid-30s. I'm 47 now, so only in the last 10 years. And even I read that book 2 years ago, and it changed my mindset on how you manage finance, how you turn liabilities into assets. So, and now I'm really starting to look at that and how I reinvest my money to try and make it work for me long term. So those three books definitely have made a profound impact on me.
Love it. The first and the third, highly recommend. I haven't read the second, but I'm going to get after it. So, All right, my friend, dude, this has been so much value. Honestly, I'm so grateful for you to be on this show, man. A huge win, not only for us to be able to connect, but to our audience back at home. To put a bow on this, Jay, from your perspective, that will help our audience who are interested in fitness, in business, in entrepreneurship, and leadership, and just being better individuals and better humans, what would your last parting piece of wisdom be?
Yeah, if you're interested in learning more about me, just go to jasonredman.com. You know, I constantly am trying to put out great information on leadership and positivity. You know, we have our Overcome Army, which is a group coaching program that at lower level, but it teaches through lives and things like that, positivity, how we drive forward from adversity, you know, the Pentagon and Peak Performance, these area. I'm excited in 2023, I'm launching a new mastermind, the Lead, Protect, Produce Mastermind, which I think are the critical components of being an effective leader and having an overcome mindset. And I'm pretty excited about that because we are going to, I hope, fundamentally change some mindsets of people, how to do those critical things. How do you effectively lead yourself? How do you effectively lead others? How do you produce better in your business? And then how do you protect yourself and your family from the chaotic parts of the world? You know, we are living in trying and violent times.
Yeah, we certainly are. Now, aside from Googling your name, is there a specific website that our audience can connect with you or a social media handle?
Yeah, jasonredman.com, and my social media is all under Jason Redman WW. So you can find me on all the socials, except for TikTok. I haven't totally embraced TikTok. I need to get into that more.
With you there.
Yeah, so, but.
All right, my friends. Well, that's where you can find them. And Jay, man, just wanted to take a second to acknowledge you before we wrap today. Just inspired by you, man. You're just a good dude, incredible heart, an incredible warrior. What you've been through for our country is just unfathomable. And I'm so grateful. I know our audience is at home. And aside from all that, the learning lessons, just being able to share some bite-sized things that will help our audience just says a lot. So I'm a huge fan of yours and appreciate you being on the show today.
Awesome. Thanks, Bryce. Appreciate it, man. Appreciate you guys.
All right, friends. I know you got a ton of value. Assuming you did, go ahead and give us a like and subscribe on YouTube and write us a 5-star review on iTunes. That way we can keep producing this content for you for free. Jay, thanks again, buddy. I appreciate you, and we will see you in the next episode, my friends.